But Brandon, let's move on into the next game that we are kind of taking an in-depth look into, and it is Big Ten action as we have the Penn State Nittany Lions, number 14, 6-2, 3-2 in the conference, going up against Michigan, who is 7-1 overall, 5-0 in the Big Ten. This game will be taking place in Ann Arbor. So I will ask you to start very simple. Can the Wolverines avoid an upset at the hands of the Nittany Lions in Ann Arbor?
They might be able to, Ricky. They might be able to, but this is going to be one of those games where I think we're going to see, it's going to be a game like we've seen Penn State and Ohio State. It's going to be a game like we've seen Michigan and Ohio State. I think we're going to get that same type of energy in this game. It's going to be, I don't want to say whether it's going to be high scoring or low scoring. That I really don't know, but I know it will be close throughout. There will be big plays. We'll see big plays. I think it will come down to the end. What we saw this past weekend from the Penn State and Iowa game, I could very much see us seeing this weekend in Michigan. One thing that's kind of rolling in favor of Penn State right now is they actually have been playing pretty well on the road. In their road games, they beat Pitt 51-6. They beat Illinois 63-24. They beat Indiana 33-28. They've actually played much better on the road than they have at home. Home game, that's where 2 losses came.
Let me throw this out there, though. Is that because of them playing on the road or the quality of opponents they've played on the road?
Well, it just so happens that the quality opponents that they played on the road hasn't been that great, but they actually have looked much better on the road than they have at home, and that's just how it looks. But they were able to seal at Penn State was this past weekend with an interception late in the fourth quarter. So they were able to do that, but Trace McSorley only completed 11 passes, threw an interception. They are a team right now that is a bit shaky since that Ohio State game where they really had a chance to win. They didn't. They lost a heartbreaker at home against Michigan State. Then they finally got healthy on the road at Indiana, and then they win coming back home. A tough game, that is, against Iowa. But this is going to be a game where they are going to have to try and run the football, I think. But Michigan has been really good against the run, allowing less than 100 yards per game on the ground this season. I think that this is going to be a tough game for Miles Sanders, but they are going to have to try and use him. They're going to have to try and set that up. Michigan's defense has been stingy really all season long. They're allowing less than 150 yards passing as well. This is a good Michigan defense because it's a Harbaugh defense. But Michigan right now, things seem to be possibly in their favor, but they might be playing without Rashawn Gary, who missed all of October. And Harbaugh's saying that he doesn't know if Gary's going to be able to make it for this contest. So if they do not have defensive lineman Rashawn Gary, that could hurt them. I mean, they've been playing without him, in October, but certainly a guy they want to have in there.
Well, and I know that the thing I am going to throw out there about Gary is that there was an article that I saw earlier today that teammates do not believe the rumors that Gary is kind of keeping himself out in order to kind of play his draft stock a little bit. They're not buying that one bit. But the thing with Michigan that I have a huge question about is if you pull up their last 4 games, I'll say, their last 4 games. Brandon, do you know the score for Michigan, opponents to themselves, in the first quarter if you combine their last 4 games? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head, no.
All right. I'm going to tell you because I have it pulled up because that's what I was looking at. They have, in the first quarter of their last 4 games, been outscored by opponents 17-3. That is a problem. And the thing is, I'm going to take this with I told you what looks like bad, but kind of, yes, it's bad, but look at this. We're out of the last 4, you got 2 road games against Michigan State and Northwestern, 2 home games. In those home games, they beat the Badgers 38-13. They beat Maryland 42-21. So they ended up winning those. However, the first quarter against Maryland, they were losing 7-3. Then Michigan went on a tear, scoring 2 touchdowns in the second quarter, scoring 10 points in the third quarter. We're up 27-7 going into the fourth before Maryland started to score some points. With Wisconsin, neither team scored in the first quarter. It was 0-0 after 1. Then Michigan won the second quarter 13-7 and then blew the door open in the fourth quarter. I mentioned the home games first because that's where they're playing. They're playing in Ann Arbor. But yet again, you look at the game that they barely won against Northwestern on the road. Northwestern in the first quarter went up 10-0. They were up 17-0 before Michigan made it 17-7 going into half. And then after halftime, Michigan made the adjustment. Michigan State, it was a similar thing. 7-0 going into halftime with a score of 0-0 after the first quarter. After halftime, Michigan State scored to tie it up. Michigan scored 2 touchdowns in the third and the fourth to win the game. So, I mean, with Michigan, the 2 things that I look at is, yes, this team has been better after half. Harbaugh teams making the adjustments that they need to at halftime. But I think a big one in this game is going to be, how do they play in that first quarter? And if they get jumped on by Penn State like they were by Northwestern, are they going to be able to dig themselves out of a hole because they couldn't score or didn't score in the first?
And hopefully it doesn't come down to that, because where Michigan's been really good this year, certainly for the last 5 games, is running the football with Karan Higdon. Mm-hmm. He's had over 100 yards in his last 5 games, and he's been a big reason for their success. Shea Patterson's been good, not great, really at any point during this season, but Karan Higdon has been great at a number of points during the season. And again, having over 100 yards in the last 5 games has been solid for this Michigan team and has been a big reason why they've been winning. And then you look on the other side for Penn State, they're giving up 161 rushing yards per game. That's just something that it goes right along with how well Higdon's played. If he's able to even have something like that, he'll win. I mean, they'll win. Michigan will. So if they're going to give up Penn State over 100 yards, 120 yards on the ground, as long as Shea Patterson isn't turning the football over, I think that Michigan would be able to pull out a win here. Now, Trace McSorley, he's going to have to be at his best. He is going to have to be at his best. He cannot turn the football over. If Michigan wins the turnover margin, they will win this game. Plain and simple. That is something that Michigan, they have the advantage when they get the turnovers. And if they're able to do that, they will certainly have the upper hand. That's why McSorley has to bring his A game. He has to be the McSorley that we saw numerous times last season with Saquon Barkley there in his final year with Penn State. We need to see McSorley step up and be the leader for this team that we know that he is. And if he does that, then I think Penn State certainly is in the game, certainly has a chance to win this ball game.
So you want to know something funny? You know how I brought up the first quarter totals for Michigan?
Yes.
So I'm making a prediction right here on the podcast. You ready for this?
Yeah.
It's going to be 0-0 after 1. After the first quarter, it's going to be 0-0. The reason why I say that, here are the last 4 games for Penn State and their first quarters. You ready for this? Against Iowa, 12-7, they trailed. Against Indiana, 14-7, they trailed. Against Michigan State, 7-0, they led. And against Ohio State, 3-0, they led. So you look at it, they've been lately, the last 2 per se, the last 2, they've been outscored in the first half, but yet again came back to win. But then when they played the two tougher teams in the conference, they actually led in the first quarter. So some may say, Ricky, you might want to predict like a 3-0, 7-0 Penn State after one. No, I think this one, because of how slow Michigan is, this will be 0-0 after the first quarter, because now looking at it, I don't think either of these teams start off hot. So it might be key on one side, hey, you got to start hot. The key on the other side is the same thing. So whoever starts off hot in this one might be able to have a leg up on everything. Well, I know you're going to say, duh, whoever does score first is usually going to be at an advantage. But because of how the other team is, whoever can put up more first quarter points might be able to put up enough of a cushion so the other team can't come back and beat them later in the game.
Yeah, again, it's who's going to start off fast in this one. But it could be funny. Both these teams, Penn State and Michigan, are putting up 41 and 36 points respectively. This could end up being a 14-7 final score.
Yeah.
I mean, this could end up being a 14-7 final score because of the defenses, because of what could happen in this game, because of just the way that these two teams could play each other. We could see a really low-scoring affair in this one. And, of course, now that I said that, it'll be 38-27. But this is a game that Michigan, if they win this, they start maybe to put a little bit of a stranglehold on the Big Ten East. A little bit with looking forward then, and that's what Michigan cannot do, is they cannot be looking forward before this game is over, or even before this game, to the Ohio State game to end the season. But Michigan, if they do get the win against Penn State, they would be 6-0 in the conference and really in controlling their own destiny. And if they were to beat Ohio State, they would win their side of the conference. They would be in the Big Ten title game.
Well, what's really funny, too, is I don't see this happening, but it could happen, so I'll throw it out there anyways. If Michigan wins this game, they'll stay undefeated. If in, I think it's 2 weeks' time, not this game, but the next game, if Ohio State loses to Michigan State, that means that the Wolverines would for sure, yes, they'd have to beat, I think it's Rutgers in their next one, but they would have to then only win one game and would outright win the Big Ten East. It wouldn't happen. It wouldn't matter what would happen in the last two when it comes to the Big Ten title, because as long as the Buckeyes have two, then Michigan can win the two before that going into the Ohio State game, and it wouldn't matter what Ohio State did because Rutgers and Indiana are in between. I personally could see Michigan winning both of them, and then that would mean Michigan would be 2 games up on Ohio State with 1 game left if Ohio State gets upset by Michigan State.
Yeah, we're seeing what could be some interesting games coming up. Of course, we'll see that in the next couple of weeks. But but Michigan, that's why this game is so important for them. Even if Penn State were to win, they wouldn't really be, for the most part, wouldn't be doing too much for themselves because they would be 4-2. That would put Michigan at 5-1, and then Ohio State most likely at 5-1. Michigan State would be 3-3. So Penn State would still be well behind. It doesn't do so much for them other than to possibly play a spoiler and throw a monkey wrench into things for the town.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask you this question, but after hearing you talk, it's kind of moot, I think, in my mind, because it's weird that they're 6-2, 3-2. They're the 14th ranked team, and they wouldn't get a title shot. Could we possibly see? I'm going to throw this out there. It depends on how the playoff situations look, but could we get, if Penn State wins this game, could we possibly then be leading up to a situation where Penn State could do to Ohio State exactly what Ohio State did to them? Where Penn State, yeah, we're a 2-loss team, but we're going to get into the playoff, and Ohio State is not, even though Ohio State would have a Big Ten championship to their record. Let's say both of them have 2 losses to their name at the end of the year. Could you see that possibly happening if a 2-loss team got into the playoff?
Well, I guess I don't see it happening because Michigan would then have to, completely combust at the top.
True.
And Ohio State would have to put themselves in the right position. They'd have to beat Michigan. So you know what I'm saying? I don't see it.
Let me paint this out.
Penn State is too far away, Ricky. They're too far away. They're not going to have a chance. If they're at 14, their best bet is to maybe get to 9 and possibly 8. They're not going to get into the top 4 for the playoff. I just don't see it happening. That's the best scenario. It's possibly 8.
Let's paint this out then, and this is the last thing I'll ask before we go on into our picks. Let's say Penn State and Ohio State beat Michigan, so Michigan has 2 losses. They have 2 losses in the conference, 3 overall. Ohio State loses to Michigan State, so they now have 2 losses in the conference. Penn State obviously has 2 losses as well. How interesting would that be for the Big Ten? The Big Ten probably wouldn't get into the playoff, but could you see something where, because it also, I'm not even going to ask the question, because it also matters what goes on in the SEC, because we could have numerous 2-loss teams over there. I am interested just to see this year is if that 4th team, if it'll be at the end of the year, hey, do we put in a 2-loss Power 5 or do we put in an undefeated UCF? Like, that is what I feel like I kind of want to see, just to see what the committee would do. But this could either be really good for the Big Ten, or these next games could be absolute chaos for the Big Ten and could hurt their playoff chances of getting a team into the playoffs. Any final things you want to bring up before we go and make our picks?
No, let's make them.
Well, this is where you guys come in. Let's see what you say down below in the comment section. What do you think about this game, about Michigan, Penn State, the playoffs, anything that we talked about in this segment down below in that comment section.